and today we'll be talking about load development and working out what's the best load for your firearm. Hey guys, Rob here from Hunt Shoot Offroad, and today we're going to talk about load development. And when it comes to reloading, this is probably one of the most important steps you need to consider before you even get onto the bench and start doing your reloading. So what load development is basically working up the best load for your firearm. So depending on the length of your barrel, the twist rate, the projectiles you're shooting, the type of powder you're shooting, all these sorts of different factors come into play when you're going to choose what load you're going to load into your firearm. So essentially you can go really crazy with this and you can be really basic with it, but either way you need to find what is the best in your firearm, and you need to know what the tolerances are for the projectiles you're using and also the powder. So I know of a few mates that have actually made the biggest mistakes you can do when reloading. Both of them had never reloaded before. Both of them had just thought that they could get stuck into it and develop their own load. Well, not even develop a load. And basically the mistake that both of them made was they got the powder from the gun shop, they got the projectiles, and they just took it home, chucked it on the bench, looked up the specifications of the powder, found the maximum powder load you can put in the firearm, or in the cartridge, loaded up to the maximum grains, put it in the case, and wondered why they were having problems. And this is exactly the sort of thing that happens all the time, and you won't see people talk about this on Facebook, because if you mention anything like this, you'll get crucified. So it's so important that we need to develop a load that is specific to your firearm. So what we're going to do is you're going to do a range of loads. So there's going to be a little bit of a cost and expenditure at the start when you're trying to develop your load to try and work out what is the best load for your firearm. So what you're going to do is you're going to have a jump online. ADI is really good. They have all their specifications on their website, so you can go on there, and we'll do that in a little bit. And you can see what the minimum load is and what the maximum recommended load is. And what you'll do is basically, depending on how accurate you want to be, you'll work from the minimum load up to the maximum load and moving up in 0.2 increments of a grain. So for example, we'll have a look at the 223 that I'm going to reload with some Sierra reload 55 grain with a 2206H, and we'll start from the minimum and we'll work up to the maximum in 0.2 grain increments. Then we'll go away, we'll shoot those off, and we'll see what happens. Now what you're going to do, the reason you're going to develop this load is because you want to find what is the most accurate for your firearm. So as you shoot the group, and then the group will close down and get smaller, and as long as you don't have any flyers, and then potentially sometimes the group will open back up. But another factor you need to consider as you go through the range is you need to be mindful of the pressures that are building up inside the firearm. So you need to check each case, and if you're starting to flatten some primers, it's time to stop and no longer use those cartridges, because there's too much pressure and essentially you could blow up your firearm. So we want to make sure that we're mindful of the extremes of the firearm, and we don't want to go beyond that, and then obviously keep an eye on the grouping and all that sort of stuff like that. And we don't want to necessarily choose the tightest group or maximum powder with the tightest group. Really what you want to do is you want to find the middle ground. So here's your first tight group, here's another good group, and here's your maximum good group. And really ultimately you want to choose the one in the middle, because that makes it easier for lazy reloading. And if you're like me, you probably just want to get in there, crank them out, and and just get out there and shoot them. Because what we're going to talk about initially is just the basics of reloading, how to basically replicate a factory round. But not only will you be replicating a factory round, you'll be choosing a round that's like perfect for your firearm. So it'll actually should shoot better than a factory round, provided you follow all the steps that you're supposed to do. So, and the reason we choose the one in the middle is because that way if the powder thrower goes a bit heavy or a bit light, doesn't matter, because we'll still fall within the parameters that makes it a good load for your firearm. So you'll see that when we eventually get out there and develop our loads. And you could go into further and talk about the overall length of the projectile, and you could get even tighter groups, but I think for the purpose of what we're talking about today, we're just talking about duplicating factory ammunition and keeping the cost down, and we're looking at just doing some loads for some varmint shooting. So, you know, even if you could shoot a group that was within 2 inches, it's probably more than suffice, but that would be a pretty unacceptable result in my mind, and it's not something that I would be happy with, and that's for sure. So, because even using the most basic of projectiles, you should be able to get a really good group out of that if you do things right. So let's go have a look at the computer. So I'll just quickly Google ADI powders, and we will open up the website here and click on technical data, and we'll go down to 223 Remington. And as you can see up the top here, we can see the trim length of the case is 1.75 inches. And we can do a conversion on that later. Then we'll scroll down. Now what we're looking for is 55 grain SPR SP. So that's for Spitzer, Spear, Soft Point. They're all the same type of projectiles there. And we look for the powder that we're using, which is 2206H in this case. And that is a .224 diameter projectile. Overall length of the round, this is including the projectile now, is 2.2 inches. And once again, we'll convert that over to millimeters. We can see the minimum load for the 2206H is 25 grains. And that will give us a feet per second of 3,176. And a maximum of 26.0 with a maximum feet per second of 3,315. Now that's obviously going to, those speeds are going to vary depending on the barrel length and the burn rate within your barrel, but it's just a good gauge. And as you can see there, that compared to most of the other powders, it is the second highest to that of 2208. So it is quite a fast moving powder, which is why it's probably one of the favorites for 223s. You know, and just have this discussion with your local gun shop and the people around you that are reloading, what they would recommend you choose. And it's what I've chosen, and it's proven to be good results for most people. So what we need to do now is work up our loads for the load development, and we're going to go in 0.2 of a grain increments. So we'll start at 25, and we'll go 25.2, 25.4, 25.6, 25.8, all the way up to 26. Now you can make smaller changes, so if you wanted to do them in 0.1 increments, but in my experience, and as a general rule, most people will only do it in 0.2 grain increments. And when you go downfield and you do some testing, you'll actually see that the difference between some of those groups is negligible anyway. So you are sort of wasting money and wasting time by doing the 0.1 increments there as well. Because the other thing too is you need to allow some time for your barrel to cool down. So if you wanted to shoot, you know, in 0.1 increments, you have to shoot like, say 60 rounds instead of 30 rounds. So you can imagine the length of time required to allow that to be even temperature on the barrel for all those groups that you shoot. So let's get stuck into it, and let's get on the scales and we'll load these up. So we'll make sure we do our 25, 25.2, 25.4, 25.6, 25.8 and 26. So now we're just going to got these loaded up, and let's head on down to the range and see how we go.
she's pretty warm. Probably should let it cool down a bit. Hey? Well, it's pretty warm. It's really warm.
Yeah. Very warm. Fuck yeah.
But, you know, the thing is, I reckon if we're on a cull, it would get that warm.
It does.
You know what I mean? Like,
you're shooting all night now.
yeah, and it's nothing for us to shoot that many.
Yeah, and that's stainless steel, heavy barrel stainless, man.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll keep going.
It'll handle it.
I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah.
It's starting to go all over the place now. Still no flattened primers.
So I've just come back from the range and in all honesty had the worst day down there. It was blowing a gale, not the premium conditions that you really hope for when you do your load development or any target shooting for that matter. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to show you the results anyway because I don't have the time to go out, and it does take a long time to film these things. And I guess I just wanted to give you guys a gauge of how I go about it and how you can go about it. And these are real world results. So I'm actually going to load off of these results because at the end of the day, most of the time when I go shooting, I'm in windy conditions. So I guess what I need is the most stable projectile, or most stable load in the windy conditions that I'll probably be shooting in. So is it that much of a drama? Not really. But what I will say is there's a massive difference between using one of the concrete range benches versus the plastic bench I was using. I could definitely feel the plastic bench wobbling in the wind, and if the dog leant against it or I shifted, it was the firearm was wobbling around considerably. So that's just one of the things you need to factor in. Is it's much better to do this in a better environment on a concrete bench, and obviously on a wind-free day. So I started off with the Buffalo River factory loads, and I did this because I wanted a bit of a benchmark to compare the results to, so you guys can see what we're sort of talking about. So I did 5-2, so this was with the cold barrel. Then this was pretty much straight after, and then I got stuck into the load development straight after that, and you can sort of see the results there. And then I left the last one as my benchmark again after I fired off the last load development, just so we could see if there was any inconsistencies with the barrel having warmed up or anything like that. And as I'm quite satisfied that that this was not due to a hot barrel, this was due to the load being a bit atrocious. The factory load's not too bad. I think it was a double shot in this middle one here, and then in this 25.2, the bottom one, there was 2 punched through that bottom hole, and you can clearly see that in the video. I think between these two groups, I mean, these are easily the best 2 groups there is to choose from. I thought the barrel was getting a bit hot when I got to the 25.4. It seemed to be all over the shop. Was I aiming as good as I could have? I'm pretty sure I was. You know, it's easy to start shifting your aim point, so what we're not looking at is how close to the bullseye is. That's when you're doing your load development. You're not worried about whether it's hitting the bullseye, you're worried about how tight the grip is. So you need to make sure you're continually aiming for the center of your target so you can make a comparison. So you can see as we go through, they start moving to the right. The wind was blowing from the left, so that's why most of them, as it went faster, started pushing off to the right. because it was going straighter through the wind as it was affecting it less. So what I will do from here is, as I talked about earlier, there's quite often you'll find that there's like 3 good loads, and I would just choose essentially the middle load. But what I'm going to do here is actually I'm going to load these up at a 25.1, so a nice load in between these 2 very consistent groups. And we'll measure those groups and give you those results. And I'm not happy with this, but like I said, this was really poor conditions. I think you should be able to hear in the video now. And you can obviously hear the wind gushing around. It was by no means the ideal dream for anyone that's out there reloading. So, but as I said, you know, it was really windy for these ones. It was really windy for these ones. And you can see that I still got good groups. And this is what I talked about before, where as I got up, they're starting to scatter a bit. And this is why it's really important to do your load development. Probably, if anything, it would be good to see a couple of loads below that one. That was ADI's minimum recommendation, so that's what I went down to. I'm really just interested in copying a factory load. So these are better than the factory loads. This is better than the factory load. So I'm more than satisfied with that. That's going to hit any fox in the head. It's going to hit any rabbit. It's going to hit any roo on a cull. That's pretty good shooting. Not my best shooting by any means, but it's good enough to do the task that the load is going to be developed for. So the last thing to do now that you've finalised on the load that you want to keep is document it somewhere. This is just the thing that comes in the reloading case. I'd recommend keeping a notebook, especially if you're going to be reloading a lot of different cartridges. So just make sure you record everything. Record the powder you use, the projectile you use, the weight of the projectile, the weight of the powder, the length of the case before you loaded it, the length of the case, overall length of the case after you loaded it, all those different things, the type of primer you used. That way, when you go to reload next, you can duplicate that in case you forgot. It's really important that you document everything you do for all your different loads, because what you want to do is make sure it's consistent next time and you don't have to spend time sighting it in again every time you go and fire your rifle because you're using different loads, because there's nothing worse than those sorts of inconsistencies. Okay guys, that's about it. Make sure you like the video, hit subscribe. I think there's a circle in the middle here somewhere, and maybe something on this side or this side, I don't know, whatever it is. And leave a comment below. I'll make sure I do get back to you. And until next time guys, have a great time. Get out there, get shooting, get hunting, and